Hello again. Last lesson, lesson 5, we talked about the idea of using an avatar to represent us, a real living avatar, that is an actor who is well known and whose English we particularly like and we enjoy listening to him speaking. One of them we mentioned was Rowan Atkinson, who is more normally thought of as Mr. Bean, but the idea is that we take him as a person, not Mr. Bean, and listen to him in interviews. And in listening to him in interviews, there's one interview which I'll post on Facebook of him being interviewed about people recognizing him or not recognizing him, but thinking he might be Mr. Bean when he's out on the street or about his everyday business. And if we take that particular interview, you can take others too, of course. You will have chosen your own avatar, I hope, by now, since last week's lesson. It could be one of the two women actors we mentioned, or one of the two, one of whom was Rowan Atkinson. And of course, we're not going to try to imitate our avatar. We're going to use our avatar to work for us. So, and by sort of delving into the way they speak and the way they interact with other people in interviews, we can learn a lot about interaction in language, and we can not imitate them, but learn a lot about how we ourselves can improve our punctuation. And we said last time, the sound of English. The sound of English is something that people rarely listen to consciously. And I think it's very important, the sound, the rhythm of intonation and stress put together to make the sound of English. It's rather like talking about the sound of a particular band, no? Their sound. This is the sound of English. But, so because we're not going to imitate them, but to pay attention, as much attention as possible, to the way they speak and the way they interact, then the first thing to do is to listen to the whole interview. Watch the whole interview and just enjoy it. Then, when we've done that, then we know a little bit more about the person. We're not beginning to identify with them exactly, but we know a bit more about them. We can learn more, of course, if we go to internet and read about them. And that's a good thing, because we're going to try to identify in a very special kind of way. And I think we should start with really the sound of it. The intonation of English, together with its stress, is the rhythm of English. And if we listen to phrases, the intonation of phrases, even single words in the language, have an intonation of their own. Listen to my pronunciation of intonation. It's intonation and intonation, because I'm communicating something at that moment. It has an intonation, one word. Even a word with one syllable has its own intonation, its own intonation. So take a section of the interview and listen very carefully to intonation and where they put the stresses on the words. And as you do that, watch their facial expressions and the way they use their heads. It's facial gesture, Not only their hands and the rest of their body language, but especially, like me now, especially their heads. And put together, those things make the sound and even the image, of English, because we're watching it. So I think that's one of the first things to do. And there are many other things we can do then, because we have even mentioned listening to the words themselves. In fact, I've intentionally avoided it because we're concerned here with the rhythm and sound of English. So once you do that, you're even more ready for the words themselves, the structures themselves, and you can take a sort of a dialogue in English, and even simply by its intonation and stress, by humming it, simply by its intonation and stress, by humming it, you can communicate to somebody a whole situation, like which sort of is, excuse me, yes, can I help you? Yes, can you tell me the way to, okay, one of the famous course book dialogues, shall we say. But intonation in itself is communication, and of course it has its own beauty, the beauty of its sound. And that's a good way to begin. After that, of course, you begin to, if you watch other interviews, for the moment I suggest not watching the films or the TV programs, but other interviews to get that normal, the way in which they normally speak. So, of course, Mr. Bean, you wouldn't want to watch his films, and use it as a way of learning how to speak English. There's almost no English there, is there? Almost no language there. But you can also do other things, like learn the way in which they answer questions. Is it the way in which you answer questions? What's different about it? Can you answer the question which the interviewer asks? As if it were you, as if you were Rowan Atkinson? Can you do that? Try. You'll be by yourself doing it anyway, probably, so it won't be embarrassing, and it's very enjoyable. So learn the way in which they react to being interrupted, for example, or the way in which they interrupt other people on talk shows. In fact, the one I mentioned is not an interview as well, it's in fact a talk show. Okay, but you can choose any other one you like, either a talk show or an interview. And that's a way in to using your avatar. Now, if you want to know more ways of using your avatar, more activities that you can use, and that you go on using and inventing more ways, then get in contact with me, get in contact with my association, which is Boardman English. You can either leave a message for me on Facebook, or you can write to me at my email, that's elt@boardman.it. elt.boardmanit. elt@boardman.it. And if you do that, I'll send you a worksheet with a number of activities that you can use that, okay, it's difficult to talk about in such a short time. So thanks very much for coming and listening to my 6th lesson. I'll see you again next week. Bye.